Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. It's my pleasure to get to welcome you to the Kentucky Technical Advisory meeting this afternoon. As we start today's meeting, I just want to start by saying thank you, expressing my sincere appreciation. I know that it's a busy time, late summer, all kinds of schedules. We've talked about people's children starting back to school and all the activities with that. It's an exciting time, but just appreciate you being here and making time for Kentucky and providing the expertise and your guidance that you always do on a quarterly basis. We're in an exciting time. It's a great juncture from us at this point. We have been updating the council now around a new reimagined accountability system for a couple of years now. We've had the Kentucky United We Learn initiative going. We've had lots of good stakeholder feedback and lots of input on developing a system. We started with prototypes and frameworks, moved into a lot of legislative work. And we have, as we announced and shared with you in May, that we had a piece of legislation that was passed, House Bill 257. And every step of the way, we've engaged with you, had very meaningful conversation, and sought your input on that and your guidance. So I'm just excited where we are today because we do have a draft of a regulation, and it's been developed, and it represents just a lot of collaboration and work and wonderful guidance that we've had from stakeholders like you and across the Commonwealth. And we're really excited about the juncture that we are at this point. Many of the components of the accountability system is set. There's only a couple areas that need slight modification or some adjustments to it. And we're going to share those today, get your feedback around those. And I just want to say thank you for providing the guidance to get us to this point. And so today we look forward to sharing with you where we are, not only with the current revised accountability system, but we've got some other updates around the timelines and timeframes and accountability reporting for fall 2026. So turn it over to Kevin to start the meeting.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Jennifer, and welcome again, as Jennifer shared. I don't get to share all the fun stuff. I just get to give out those reminders for our open meetings requirements. So I'll be quick and brief and turn things over to our friends at the center. But as a reminder to all our presenters today, in order to share your slides, you will need to take control of the slides. Upon conclusion of your presentation, please wait for the next person to take control of the slides. We do not want to stop sharing. I've been threatened more than once today, don't stop sharing. So just passing that along. Before I hand the meeting over to our facilitators with the center, I want to review or to share introductions of our TAC vote members. Wanted to go over the expectations for conducting virtual meetings. The meetings must comply with the requirements of the Open Meetings Act. Accordingly, KTAC members must ensure their video is streaming and they can be seen throughout the duration of the meeting. I think we've saw everybody and their cameras were working, which is great. Committee members, please mute. I'll get it up in a second. Please mute your microphone when not talking. However, all discussions must be broadcast to the public. Therefore, be sure your microphone is not on mute when you speak. Every time you speak during the meeting, please unmute your mic, state your name, and take a short pause. This will give the software time to recognize you. Please silence or turn off other electronic devices that may cause disruption to your sound feed. Minutes will be taken and shared with the general public on the KDE website once they become available. In addition, KRS 158-6455 requires that the department submit reports regarding the advice and recommendations of this committee to the Office of Education Accountability by July 1st and December 1st of each calendar year. All right, there's all my reminders. So at this time, I'll hand things over to our friends from the center to get the day started by introducing themselves and our TAC members. So Laura, Chris, I'm not sure who's gonna
I'll
take
take
it
it
from
from
here.
here, Kevin. Thank
All
you
right,
very
thank you.
much. Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Pensino. I'm an associate at the Center for Assessment, and I'm going to walk through our plan for today and then facilitate introductions of our KTAC members, as well as walk through our some initial tasks that we have as a group. So first of all, TAC members, as a reminder to all of you, we did send the KTAC landing page as a resource for you to access today's agenda, slides, and other relevant materials. That does include the recommendations document that my colleagues and I will be completing throughout the meeting. And we, as a reminder, will ask you to review those recommendations as we proceed through our meeting topics today to make sure that we are capturing your good advice and recommendations with fidelity. And those are the recommendations that we will ask you to vote on at the end of the meeting. But what will we cover first? Other than some of the housekeeping you're hearing about, we will, after introductions, review and ask you to vote on the meeting summary from our May 26th convening. We'll get some exciting updates about assessment and accountability from our friends in the Office of Assessment and Accountability at KDE. That will include then a discussion about the accountability draft regulations that Jennifer just referenced. We'll take a break at that point. Then we'll transition to the topic about EL reclassification, that's for English learner reclassification, hearing from our friends at Humro. And we'll wrap up by, again, reviewing the recommendations, kind of a final review. I do plan for us to kind of review as we go throughout the day today. That tends to make things a little simpler. We'll do a final review of the recommendations and vote, discussion, and close out the meeting today. So that is our plan. With that, I'm going to transition into some introductions. So again, as I said, my name is Laura Pensino, and I'm going to pass it off to my two colleagues who are joining today from the Center for Assessment to support the meeting. Chris, I'll go to you first.
Hi, everybody, I'm Chris Domaleski, also with the Center for Assessment, pleased to help facilitate today's meeting. And I'll pass the baton to Kyla for her to introduce herself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kyla McClure. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Center for Assessment, and I'll primarily be in the background taking notes and recording all of your good ideas and thoughts. Thank you.
Thanks, Kyla. And now we'll transition to our KTAC members. And I'm just going to go in the order that I see you all here. So we'll start with Corinne, please.
Hello, I'm Corinne Huggins Manley. I'm from the University of Florida, a professor of educational measurement.
Thanks, Corinne. Leslie?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leslie Kang. I am a Director of Psychometrics at the National Board of Medical Examiners.
Pete?
Hello, everyone. I'm Pete Goldschmidt. I'm the Director of Research and Evaluation at the Los Alamos National Labs Foundation.
Thank you. And Suzanne?
Hi, everyone. Suzanne Lane. I'm a retired professor in educational measurement from the University of Pittsburgh. It's good to be here.
Great. And my thanks to all of you for being able to make this meeting work as well. As Jennifer knows, we know everyone's time is precious and it's a busy time of year. At this point, we're going to transition to discussion and voting on the meeting summary from our May 26th meeting. As a reminder, there are a few kind of outcomes or products from each of our KTAC meetings. The first is the recommendations document, which I mentioned, and we complete that during the meeting. We vote on that during the meeting, and that kind of finalizes what your recommendations are. Directly or very soon following the meeting, we also produce a high-level pretty simple meeting summary that simply elaborates slightly, frankly, on the agenda and describes what was discussed in the meeting, also captures recommendations. In addition to the summary, because we've heard from you as TAC members that it's been helpful, there's a sort of supplemental meeting minutes, and I refer to those as minutes because they just go into a bit more detail. They're not at the minute level, obviously, but a little more detail for all of you. That is not something that we need to vote on. That's really just for TAC members to reference in case it's helpful for you, knowing that many of you serve on multiple TACs, knowing that it's often been several months since we last met. It can be nice sometimes to review something with a little more detail just to remind yourselves about kind of the nature of the discussion that we had previously. That said, what we do need you to vote to approve at this time is the summary, again, that succinct document describing at a high level what was covered in the May 26th meeting. We did send that to you in advance, so hopefully you had a chance to look at it. As a reminder, we'll use kind of Robert's rules here. We do need a motion, a second. We'll check for any discussion, and then a vote to approve the summary. So I will kind of open the floor with a reminder to please introduce yourself when you speak.
Suzanne Lane. I have no additional comments. Nice job.
Okay.
Corinne Huggins Manley, I felt the same way. It was a good capture of our last meeting.
Yeah, this is Leslie Kang. I want to, and I think I've said this in the past, but I really appreciate the notes. Having missed the last meeting, it was good to read it, and a lot of it pertains to today's topic. So I really want to echo the same compliments for these wonderful notes.
So at any point, someone could make a motion if you feel so compelled.
This is
Oh,
Corinne
no.
Huggins Manley. I'll motion. Oh, sorry.
Okay,
Motion to approve.
thanks, Chris.
Mosquito second.
All right. Any further discussion? Okay, and so what we will do is just do a visual vote. So I'll ask you to raise your hand if you approve the motion to, or if you support the motion to approve our May 26th meeting summary. And I see full support. So the motion carries. Thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate your engagement in that activity and the structure that we have for that as well. That's all we had to do in terms of approving documentation from our past meetings. At this point, we can pivot and transition a little more into the content for today. So I will pass it off to our friends in assessment and accountability. We're going to be hearing from Jennifer and Shara. And if you guys want me to drive, I'm happy to, but if you want to take control, that's certainly fine as well.
Thanks, Laura. I have control.
Fantastic.
Well, good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're located there. I'm not sure where everybody's from exactly, but wanted to bring you just a few updates from the assessment and accountability world as things that are happening now and how we wrapped up the spring testing season. So we'll jump right into the highlights from testing. When we were here with you last, we were in the middle of spring testing, and so I wanted to show you and bring to you how we concluded. We had a wonderful, uneventful testing administration this past spring. And so as you can see there, for our KSA online testing, our largest number of tests completed in a single day was 171,586. And then we concluded the year with online tests completed being 1,582,370. And then, of course, we had our SAT this past spring, and we completed 46,491 of those online tests. And then for access, we completed 44,885. So we to say we really had an exceptional testing season this past spring. So with that, I wanted to, now that all the tests are complete and the data is in the districts, we're moving into fall reporting. So fall reporting for 2026 is, so we got all the scores out to districts once again the first week of August. So for the most part, I believe it was before school began. So we're really excited about that. And then, so now that all the scores are into the districts, we're moving into that fall data review. So that's taking place at this time. It'll conclude tomorrow. And then we have tentatively set quality control day for September the 23rd, and that'll be the first time that districts or the district's assessment coordinators will get a look at their accountability data, and they'll look for any systemic issues. And then we'll move into our embargo period, October 13th and 14th, and then public reporting on October the 15th. And then that 10-day regulatory period following after public reporting. So that is the latest and greatest from the assessment accountability for 2026. So at this time, I'll pause and turn things over to Jennifer, unless anyone has any questions. Okay, well, Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Shara. Will you go to the next slide, please?
Yep.
Thank you.
Shara, can I just ask a question? This is Suzanne Lane. I'm sorry, I was late. I was trying to find my hand and I took off my glasses, which is a problem.
I totally understand it.
Shara, I'm not sure if I don't remember. Do you have many opt-outs, or what percentage of the students on average participate in your assessment across the grades?
So Kentucky is we don't have an opt-out option, and right up top of my head, I don't know what our participation rate. Jennifer, do you happen to know what our participation rate is?
It's quite
pretty
high.
Yeah, it's a high number.
Yes, because what we have a quality control process, and we have only exemptions for medical reasons. We used to have another type of exemption, extraordinary circumstance exemption, and that was found by the U.S. Department of Education, although we had done it for years, to be in violation of ESSA. So we have removed that extraordinary circumstance exception, and we now only have medical reasons for students not taking. It's very small, very small. If and we have processes that if students don't test, if something happens, they're missed or whatever, they are still included in accountability calculations at the lowest possible score. So that ensures our participation in inclusion and accountability of all students.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So as far as the legislative updates, when we were here in May, we talked to you about Senate Bill 197 and having a new section 15, that basically requires the Kentucky Department of Education to process a new procurement for our college admissions exam. And we worked with the governor, our governor, Andy Beshear, and convinced him that part of the section that was included that the funds can't be used on a college admissions exam unless it was based on the Kentucky academic standards, be removed. So Sheriff, if you'll go to the next slide, you'll see he did remove the language in relation to the Kentucky academic standards, but he left the current verbiage here that a new procurement must be processed. And so we're in the middle of that right now. We've expanded the evaluation members. We've included partners that we had not before in our procurement. We started the procurement before in 2024 that led to the College Board receiving the bid or awarding the contract for our college admissions exam. Now, this has been a transition for our educators, our communities, our students, and our parents, because Kentucky has been a long time ACT state. We actually started in 2008 administering the ACT to our juniors. And so from 2008 through 2025, we have the ACT. And so the spring assessment in 2026, as Shara just shared with you, was the first time our state administered the SAT. So with the inclusion of this new section in the bill that had us go through another process for a college admissions exam, as I mentioned, there were a couple of changes to the RFP that it did include other partners in evaluation. But one of the pieces that was interesting to us, and we changed the RFP, is that the language says that a contract should be awarded to a vendor or vendors whose assessment product satisfies the statutory requirement. So this is an unknown for us because we've always had one vendor in Kentucky, but there's this possibility of having two vendors for our college admissions exam. Now, again, we're going through the process. It's a fair and unbiased process. But again, that RFP and that bid does allow for more than one vendor. And so again, that's a little new territory for Kentucky. And so if anyone of the members have any experience with having more than one vendor for the state, I appreciate hearing that, especially if that was a possibility, then how is the comparison between the tests or the long-term trend is something that is of interest to our legislators as well. So would appreciate any thoughts around those two areas. And then as you're thinking, Shara, if you'll go to the next slide, I think there's one more before I turn it over and pause. So we have started, many school districts have started the 26-27 school year without knowing which college admissions exam will be administered in the spring to their juniors, because as the legislation said, it was to be implemented this coming spring. So that leads to a little uncertainty for our educators, for our students, for our parents, and it leads to some anxious questions and a little bit of nervousness from our educators and our students. So we're working with the Finance and Administration Cabinet here in Kentucky that facilitates all of the procurement processes for state government. It's not just the Kentucky Department of Education, but it's all of state government. works with the Finance and Administration Cabinet. We have specific laws here that guide the facilitation or guide that process of securing a contract for the state. So we're working with them, and we're really hoping that a contract or contracts is in place very soon. And we're hoping that that award can be made public in October. So very quick timeline and time frame for which we're turning around this procurement process, because it generally takes about 18 months. And we started it in May. And so the Finance and Administration Cabinet realizes this is a priority for us. It's a priority for our students and our schools in our communities. So let me pause there and see if TAC members have any insight or any experience that they could share with us along these lines.
Pete and then Leslie.
So I have a couple questions. I'm short on insight, but no, I'll have some insight at some point maybe. So if you do, I guess the first question is, what sort of decision rules do you have, and why would you go to two vendors? I mean, is there something that leads you to think that one vendor won't be sufficient, or I mean, how will you decide between one and two?
So yeah, that's a good question. And, there is model procurement code here in Kentucky. The Finance and Administration Cabinet have those particular details. All contracts that we put out, let me say that we do, the evaluation is based on both a technical as well as the cost. So, for transparency, I'm not part of that, so I'm talking from no knowledge. But if for some reason that it's even, if it's an even evaluation both on technical as well as on the cost, say that both vendors come in and they both bid exactly the same amount, or something like that, by chance.
Okay. And if you do end up with two vendors, will it be the student's choice on which vendor to use, or will it be a district decision or a school decision, or how would that be? How would that play out?
So my thoughts are that it would be a district decision, because I couldn't imagine a school managing per student. But I would appreciate any technical feedback as well.
And no, I'll stop there for the moment. Thanks.
Hi, this
Leslie,
is
go ahead.
Leslie. Yeah, this is Leslie Kang. Yeah, I guess sort of comment and then a question. And the comment is pertaining, Jennifer, the question you asked. So I do have the experience when I worked for a vendor of being part of a contract where there were multiple, it was a single vendor, and then there was experience with multiple vendors. And perhaps not a surprise from a purely logistics perspective, you'll have to put a lot of consideration into, I'll just call it 3 C's, I guess. There's coordination, communication, and consistency. So coordinating meaning like you'll have generally organizations just have processes that are very different. And oftentimes from just purely from administration to just how they process scores, all that is something that will be important to understand what the differences are. I know in certain contracts, what they do is even if they have multiple vendors, one of the vendors is considered more of a primary, and then they kind of help you manage the other vendor in terms of making sure that everything's in line. Or I've heard of other cases, although I can't think about how I had, where you actually have a third-party vendor that manages both. but it would be a lot from your agency's perspective to make sure that, you know, in terms of just how things are done are similarly. Communication often then, of course, means how they talk to each other, and if for the extent that you want things to be aligned, to be as transparent as possible, that will be important that you talk between them. And consistency then just goes with the experience that the users will have. Is there a different testing interface for each of those? And how our reports often reported, they could look different. And more importantly, if in this particular case, if you're having, you know, schools or districts choose between the college entry exam they use, there's going to be some, you know, back and forth about. And what will probably happen was schools and districts will try to find out which exam is probably most easy, you know, most accessible to their kids and and stuff. So there'll be some choosing there, and then you'll have to be able to manage that in terms of making sure that people know what the relationship, and this is, I guess, where we can provide some technical advice when you're going down the road. But that's one thing that I feel like from our experience. So it is good to have that variety, but there will be some extra work to manage the multiple vendors. As my question is actually related to what you have on the slide here. It says we will begin the school year without a selected exam for college entrance. And this is not my area of expertise, but I do remember when we supported one project, we had a legal expert on that was part of our advisory committee, and they talked about this idea of due notice in the sense that at the start of every school year, the state education agency needs to let parents, teachers, students know, especially if there's stakes for the students, what the exams are. Now, I don't know how if these exams will figure into your accountability system. I know there's a post readiness indicator, and no, probably they do figure into it. Are you? And so my question is, are you at risk or vulnerable the fact that you don't have a actual college entrance exam at the start of the school year that you may want to be able to deal with or mitigate before the risk becomes too much? Because I understand from that particular context, it seemed to be like it had to do with something to do with the fact that it was federally mandated, so it's something that the state agency has to give due notice to students and parents and schools.
So we agree, and that's where the concern comes forward, is that they are not we can't tell them because there's not a contract for the 26-27 school year. And one of the reasons we are working diligently to get a contract in place as quickly as possible. You know, there are multiple steps in this procurement process. We're going to follow each of them so that there's not a question about the bid or the bid process or any nefarious work there in that regard. But we're in an uncharted position, not knowing what it is at this point.
Hi, it's Corinne Huggins-Manley from the University of Florida. Raise my hand. I could use some reminders about, to Dr. King's point, about where this comes into the accountability plan. I started to kind of rack my brain. I know I have old files from you all, but that would help a lot in terms of just thinking about beyond individual stakes, which are very important, and logistical things. How would maybe 2 exams chosen at the district or school level, cause maybe some technical issues or some problems in terms of accountability metrics? I know the things we're going over today, this won't affect, right? You're not doing an individual change at this level, and English language, but so I could just use a reminder of how it is baked into the accountability. Yeah.
Sure, thank you. So the college admissions exam is one of a variety of ways to demonstrate post-secondary readiness. So students have the ability to demonstrate either academic readiness or career readiness. And with each of those different pathways, there are multiple measures. For the academic, obviously the college admissions exam. There are multiple college placement exams. We have a Kentucky created Coyote assessment. There is an AccuPlacer, an Alex, things like that are approved through the state. We've got dual credit. We've got multiple advanced placement exams. there is the opportunity to use the International Baccalaureate and the Cambridge International. So those are a few of the academic ready. On the career ready side, there are again multiple ways that include dual credit, end of program assessments, advanced placement, um, apprenticeships, and things of that nature.
And I'm going to
So-
just chime in to note that to put a little finer point out as well from Jennifer's helpful explanation. The Kentucky state assessments and alternate, those are administered through high school. So those are the assessments that ESSA would consider the reading and mathematics assessments that go through a peer review process. This is different from those assessments.
Thank you,
That's
Laura.
very helpful.
Yes. Thank you.
Sorry, this is Corinne Huggins Manley. That is very helpful and eases some of the issues you would have. You already have multiple, there are choices for the student on, and I assume also their school and parents. So thank you. Yeah.
Suzanne, you can go ahead.
This is Suzanne Lane. So Laura, did you say this, that this assessment is not going to be part of ESSA?
This is part of ESSA accountability, but it is not, and it is not in the section of ESSA. It doesn't fit into the requirements of the section of ESSA that necessitates a peer review of the assessment. So it is the KSA and the alternate KSA for Kentucky. Those are the assessments used in like the achievement indicator in ESSA that will be used to determine academic growth, the reading and mathematics assessments, while the college entrance exam do measure those content areas, performance on those content areas. The results are used in the school quality and student success indicator. Using the results only within that indicator does not prompt a peer review process for those assessments. So assessments you use in school quality and student success indicator in ESSA do not have to go through the peer review process, is a clear way of hopefully of saying that.
I was going to ask if there was going to be any plans to investigate the differences in the alignment of either of these assessments with the Kentucky content standards, which might help inform the decision, but that doesn't seem necessary here.
Suzanne, I'm
Am I
gonna
right?
use this as an opportunity to pipe in, and I'd love the TAC to consider some discussion and potentially a recommendation on this issue. This issue of comparability and what kinds of interpretations can and can't be supported. So I'm going to make a claim and invite the TAC to react to it, that without additional evidence, such as what you're suggesting, alignment or otherwise, that claims of interchangeable comparability will not be supported. Now, it's possible to do things like concordance to show a relationship, but that's different from being able to combine the results from two different college readiness assessments and make a singular claim about, percent of students that are college ready, or, assuming that performance on one is interchangeable with another. And I would just sort of invite the TAC to respond to my invitation here to consider comparability and what kinds of interpretations you think are and aren't supported. And this may be an area that we would want to get into the record for our TAC notes.
This is Suzanne. I agree with you fully, Chris, because I was thinking about the comparability of the two assessments to begin with and the extent to which you can make certain claims about them, and that if a certain percentage do well on one, is that the same as the same percentage on the other one. So I think comparability is a real issue if it's used in accountability.
Yeah, I would, this is Pete, I would suggest that the comparability, that may be more important if the claim is college ready is the extent to which each of the assessments demonstrates college readiness based on college performance, either college acceptance or the first year of credit accumulation or grades, that's where you're going to see the real comparability for those assessments.
Hi, this is Corinne Huggins Manley. I just, in answering to Chris's call for input, that is why I asked the accountability question. So I'm less concerned given the choices already available for people to show different metrics towards post-secondary readiness or other indicators. But I do wonder if, for many reasons baked into the system, your educators and district leaders and others have been comparing in some other ways that affect their system, and if they are aware that that wouldn't be able to happen anymore. I just think there might be a lot of things going on in the schools that aren't necessarily written down at the state level for accountability. So that's my thought on comparability there.
And this is Leslie Kang. Yeah, I think I agree with what my fellow TAC members already said. I guess, Chris, thank you for surfacing this point, because I think, yeah, from a purely measurement perspective, comparability means, does that mean if I get a score on this test, can I use it comparably, interchangeably with the score on the other one? Of course, we know there's a lot of conditions in the strictest technical sense to support that. In most cases, even when we say concordance, we're not implying that, even though maybe oftentimes people view that as, oh, if I get an SAT score of this, then it's equivalent to an ACT score. There's always the danger of interpretation. And I guess that's the point I want to sort of bring up, is in reading through the pre-read you gave us and looking at the legislation, and this wasn't actually something I think that was amended. I think there was always this, like, just to use AP and IB, for instance, there is like, you can get credit if you have a 3 or higher. I think that was modified, 3 or higher on an AP exam, or 4 or higher in IB. And even though the legislation itself doesn't say that, oh, those are comparable, it's easy for someone to say, okay, those must be comparable, right? Because we're getting similar credit for those. And I think that's the danger about sort of interpretation or the implied implications of what something that's said. So, but yeah, to Chris's good point and all the other colleagues, I think we want to make sure that that people don't view those as, just because they're listed together as various options to get, to demonstrate post-ready college readiness, it doesn't mean that actually those thresholds are actually comparable. So that's something to note.
Well, thank you so much for that good discussion. All right. I think that, Shara, are we ready to go move? Okay, so our next topic is around the accountability regulation. And we've mentioned it several times that we've got a piece of regulation moving through the process, the regulatory process, because of the statutory changes that came about through House Bill 257 in the current legislative session, or the 2026 legislative session. So it brought about multiple changes. And Sheriff, you'll go to the next slide. So what we're looking for here during this discussion is for you to continue to share your good thoughts, your good questions, and your helpful recommendations along the development of this regulation. Now, I'll note for you that there are many pieces and components that are set, and we're going to bring forward to you some adjustments or some tweaks that we're looking at as far as direction. Shara and I have been in front of multiple stakeholder groups. The commissioner has, I want to say, 21 stakeholder groups, and we've been in front of most of those, as well as other groups that we thought would have an interest in the accountability system, and that we generally don't involve in the discussions. We have a new indicator, chronic absenteeism, and we're working with directors of pupil personnel. And so we're expanding our engagement to involve multiple stakeholders And we've gotten so much good feedback, and we've incorporated as much as we possibly can. I feel that we're in a really good spot here with this regulation. Since we've met back in May, the Kentucky Board of Education was blessed to have Laura Pinsino in front of them in June, and we had a really good discussion about growth models and the difference between a categorical growth model and a student growth percentile model. And that good working discussion led into the development of the regulation, and we had the opportunity to be in front of the Kentucky Board of Education in August, earlier this month, for a first read of the regulation. They wanted to have a few tweaks after some really deep discussions around their priorities and what their values are within growth and the weights within the system. So again, we're looking for your guidance and support toward this this continued development of the draft regulation. If you'll go to the next slide, Shara. Okay, I think I'll turn it over to Shara to talk about the assessment changes.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. So we've talked to you, as Jennifer said, about this. So this is just some reminders for you really as we go through. So the first changes, if you'll remember, were around the assessments. So we're still going to be testing grades 3 through 8, 10 and 11, and but we're removing the House Bill 257 removes writing. So that's the editing, mechanics, and the on-demand writing, and the quality of school climate and safety survey. So those pieces will be removed. And then for accountability changes, as Jennifer said, we have new indicators of chronic absenteeism. We have individual student growth. The evaluation of change for each indicator. If you'll remember, we had status and change that for each indicator. So that change component is going to be removed. And writing, again, is removed from the state assessment results indicator. And we moved from a 2 overall score. If you'll remember, we had the state overall score that yielded those colors. And then we had the overall score for the federal piece that gave us the federal classifications. So with this system, we'll have one overall score used in the state accountability system that meets those federal requirements. And so with that, here's a look again at the lineup for the new indicators for the 26, starting with the 26-27 school year. So the indicators will be state assessments, state assessment results in reading, mathematics, state assessment results in science and social studies, that individual student growth for reading and mathematics, English learner progress, chronic absenteeism, and then at the high school level only, you'll have the post-secondary readiness and the graduation rate. And so with that, I'll pause. And if you have any questions, feel free to come off mute, raise your hand. But if not, I'll turn it over to Jennifer, who's going to go in a little more depth about student growth. Oh, I see we do have some hands up. I don't know which one was first.
I'll just invite folks to go, in order. So that'll be Pete and then Leslie.
Okay. All right, Pete.
Thanks. Yeah, I couldn't tell who's first, so I'm glad somebody's refereeing here. So when I was reading the regulation that you sent, it said that the graduation rate included it's the high school graduation cohorts that take 4 and 5 years. So my reading of that is that you're going to have a single graduation rate that includes 4 and 5 year students. Is that what's going to happen, or is there going to be a separate 4-year rate and a 5-year rate?
That is not changing. The cohort rate is when they enter in the 9th grade, if it takes them 4 years to graduate or 5 years to graduate. But I'll let Jennifer's more of an expert on that than I am. So Jennifer, am I telling you right?
Yes, that's right. We'll have the 4-year rate and then the 5-year rate averaged.
Okay, so they're separate. Okay, thanks. It was a little unclear. I was just double checking.
Okay. And then I don't know who was next.
Yep. Yes, I'm next. Hi, this is Leslie Kang. Yeah, thank you for this introduction, Shara. I guess in reading through the legislation, as Pete just mentioned, I guess one question that struck me, I guess it's back to the question, I guess, back to what Dr. Domaleski had raised about comparability, in the sense that how much with the new system and the new indicators, it's probably probably an obvious thing to say, like whatever score comes out may not be completely comparable to what was here in the old system. And I know the legislation that your regulation actually requires you to do an actual standard setting process where you actually reset the standards for those different colors that you have. But in terms of how you communicate this, will the field realize that really whatever was the ratings you had before will be very different starting this year with the new indicators and I guess presumably new standards as well?
Well, that is our goal, is to communicate that as clearly as possible. Jennifer, you have anything to add to that?
Yes. So with any of our communications, we have networks of individuals. We particularly work with our district assessment coordinators. We do a really good job of keeping them abreast. We depend on them then to turn and then train and communicate the system to their fellow district employees or their staff, their colleagues, the teachers in there. We have other networks that we work through. We're in front of superintendents, and we'll definitely communicate that. But to say that all of our groups and our constituents would understand the differences between a green last year and a green next year, I'm fairly certain that will be a pretty steep climb.
Yeah, and I think sort of to get ahead of this, one thing that you may want to do, and this could be part of the standard setting process, would be if you take a look at schools or districts where their color classification would change, and being ready to be able to make sure you know that they know why they're changing and be able to explain to them so that they're not surprised. Either they go up or go down, I think it would be a good thing, especially the ones that may go down. They may perceive that, oh, it's the system that caused us to go down, and so that's something that you may want to. I think whoever helps lead the standard setting process will probably include that data and probably give you that data that you can use to prepare for that communication.
Well, thank you, and we'll partner with the Center for Assessment and the three lovely folks here on this call to help us with that.
Yeah. Yes. And then I seen some other hands up, but I can't see who they are.
This is Suzanne Lane. I think one of the important things to do is to look at differential impact on different subgroups when you change procedures.
Okay.
That might help inform any potential modifications that are needed.
Thank you for that feedback.
And I guess because it's at the school level, you'll have to think about like low income areas versus high income, and other important variables to the state of Kentucky.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And then Laura, do we have anyone else with their hand up? Oh, I think Pete's back on.
Yep, Pete's turn. And Pete,
Pete,
it
if you're
seems you're muted still.
Oh, man, it was such a good point. You missed it. Actually, the question / comment is, are you considering having a one-time business rule that limits the amount of movement from classification from one year to the next? Because I'm sure, there's always going to be some outliers that will move two classification categories. And that's going to raise, a lot of concern for folks. And so if you limit it to say that for this year only, we're going to limit movement to only one position, that might appease people who will raise a giant red flag in this transition year.
Okay, all right. Thank you for that, Pete.
I don't see any other hands at this time, Shara.
Okay, thank you, Laura. So Jennifer, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. We've been in front of you multiple times talking about individual student growth. I'll remind you, just as a part of the setting the context for this part of the discussion, is we've had accountability thought partners. We've had meetings with them multiple times, and we've had in-person and virtual sessions, and we've talked with them about multiple aspects of the individual student growth. We started out talking about use and use cases and growth data. They talked about the technical aspects of the accountability, or the individual student growth. They talked about the relationship between growth and achievement, how it was fair. They went into backgrounds on student demographics, and they really landed around categorical growth and value tables in the development of the system. So now, when we're looking at this individual student growth, we're looking at reading and math in elementary and middle schools. The last time that we were here with you in May, we considered and discussed feedback that we had about possibly including growth at the high school level. Based on your guidance, we understood that it was technically sound and doable to have individual student growth at high school. We test 3 through 8th grade, and then once at high school in reading and math at 10th grade. So based on your feedback, we understood that it was technically feasible to have high school growth. But as we talked, particularly with particular groups, and especially the Kentucky Board of Education, they had enough concern about that skip year of students not testing at 9th grade, and specifically about the different pathways that our students take to get to their math and their reading at that 10th grade, because the paths can be quite different. One student could take basic math classes or basic English classes. Another student could take all AP classes or all dual credit classes to get there. So there was enough concern from our stakeholders that we have not included growth at the high school in this initial, this draft. That's moving forward of the regulation. So when we talk about individual student growth, it's reading and math only, grades 3 through 8. And so that's what we're moving forward with, as well as that categorical growth, or that those value tables. Sheriff, you'll go to the next slide, please. So this individual student growth, it replaces the change component. As you recall, that we had on each of the indicators, we had both status, which is current year performance, and we had the change, which was the difference in that indicator for the school. So how it changed from one year to the next. Now, we understood those were different cohorts of students. So we're really investing time now to educate and communicate what the difference in change in individual student growth is. So we're really digging down and being very specific about the individual student growth is and not change, and how those are how they're different. So I think that will hopefully help as we move. And Dr. King, you mentioned communications about the differences in that. So we're really starting that type of communication now, and how those, at least in those particular indicators, are going to be different. That uses the performance again on a value table and applies to elementary and middle school. So if you'll go to the next slide. So here is the current value table that we have honed throughout the development of the process. I want to say that there's been multiple versions of this. Not counting, because I know we've had at least 7, and there's been like an A and B of one version. So this has been honed in quite a bit here. You'll see the values. I mean, and you can see as you interpret the ends, the middle, where the people's values lie. As you can see, I'll start with the green diagonal. So that's kind of the expected growth, is what we're looking toward, that students kind of grow with their achievement of those higher level standards. So if a student is, let's say, is proficient low, in the way you know how to use this chart, if you're the prior years along the column, and then the current year is along the row at the top, and the intersection of those two is where the points come from that would be contributed to the school's accountability. So if the student was proficient low in 3rd grade and remained at proficient low in 4th grade, that's kind of the expected amount of growth, because the student is then picking up that advanced level, or in achieving those higher level standards at that same performance level that they were before. So that's kind of where we're expecting them to be from one year to the next. And then if you'll notice that we've been able to subdivide all of the performance levels. So novice low and high, apprentice low and high, proficient low and high. And this time, where we've had a categorical growth model previously, distinguished was not subdivided, but there was a clear desire to have that performance level subdivided as well. So if the student then moved up a half level, so let's stay with our proficient low student, and they move to proficient high, there is recognition of that then advancement in that proficiency level. And then if the student moves 2 half levels, there's even more credit attributed to that school. So you would, our same student that was proficient low in 3rd grade, if they move to distinguished low, then that would yield even more credit, so the 125. On the reverse end, if they have just a slight reduction, there was still value in that, and even though they went back slightly, there was minimal credit or half credit given to those students that just regressed to that next lowest level. But if they went down 2 half levels, you see that there's no credit in the system. So that's kind of the values in the center. Now, where the most of the conversation has been are on those corners. And those corners, they have gotten a lot of discussion around those. So we've had multiple iterations of these the corners. This is where the Kentucky Board of Education has landed with the values in the corners. So you can see particularly a distinguished high student, if they remain distinguished, then they get the full credit of 100 at distinguished low, and then get the extra over at 125 if they stay distinguished high to distinguished high, because there's no farther half credit or half level to go. So those two areas have been a deep conversation about those, as well as over here on the bottom left with novice low to novice high. You can see that gets half credit, and where it using the same logic as the other content or other performance levels. And then also the apprentice low to novice high, that has again some credit using that same logic from those other performance areas. So that is kind of where we are with individual student growth in that and the updated value tables, and the discussions that we've had currently with our stakeholders, and particularly most recently our State Board of Education. So let me pause there. Did I maybe saw a hand go up? Yes, I think I did. Leslie, Dr. King?
Yes. Yes. Hi, this is Leslie. Thank you, Jennifer, for that. And I commented actually two, I guess, suggestions, but I'm also curious to see what my fellow tech members think. First of all, the comment is, I really appreciate how you just what you just explained there, Jennifer, because I've heard this. It's a little bit cliche, but I've heard this, like, we call these a values table because it's a table of different values, but also I think it often communicates the values that the department has as how you view growth. And I feel like the way you just explained it was very clear in terms of like what was the thinking that went behind, choosing these values. And I really want to say, just appreciate even just the visualization here of the colors. I think just having those colors with the 100s in green, the 50s in yellow really helps to kind of, at least when I looked at it, it really helped understand, like, okay, yeah, so if you're saying that maintaining the same level is expected growth, and that's what the green is. And then I did notice that the 110s were added compared to the pre-read we had. That seemed like was I mean, maybe it was, like you said, after the KBE met, that was a change that occurred there. So, but I do want to just say, like, yeah, it's wonderful the way that was just explained, and it's really clear. The two suggestions, and these come more from a technical measurement perspective, is I've helped another state with this once, and coming up with the division of those levels. One thing that we've noticed, oftentimes, especially in sort of the middle range, so maybe where your apprentice and proficiency is, that generally just because of how the score scale is, you often are, the difference between proficient low and proficient high, at least in that context, those score points are actually not that wide. And it would be interesting to take a look at the score range that you have in each of those levels and compare them to like a measure of measurement error, like the standard, like the conditional standard error measurement, just to make sure that what you're trying to prevent there is that any movement is just not simply due to noise, right? Because given it's possible that someone could just have a few extra points within a standard error measurement that's purely due to just what you would expect out of measurement error. So you want to make sure to kind of check that to make sure that what you're actually capturing is actual growth and not just noise in that case. And another suggestion I had, and I know the center has experience doing this, is one other way, and you may have already done this when you were kind of coming up with the tables. It's actually not too difficult to use some data to build like what I call a simulator, where you have these values in a table and have actual data from the current year. And if you tweak some of these values just to see how different schools, their actual growth indicator would change. And it could serve as a good reasonableness check to you to say, yeah, this makes sense. These are the schools that I do feel like it makes sense for them to have high growth values versus these ones are the ones that still need improvement. And more importantly, the spread of those. You can see if the spread of those growth scores that come out of this table makes sense to you as well. So it's probably not too difficult to build this using like a spreadsheet tool or some sort, but that's something that I know that has been helpful in other contexts.
Thanks, Leslie. Pete, you're up.
All right, I want to piggyback on Leslie's comments about the splits within the performance levels, and certainly agree about the potential for overlap, or whether it being noise or not. And it might be, what I've seen, sometimes it's unavoidable to completely separate those, and so you're gonna have to get comfortable with some amount of probability of misclassification there. And I think the other thing to kind of add something new is that it would be important to look how these divisions play out across grades, because there's likely, as we know, growth slows over time, and it might become more and more difficult in upper grades to make some of the same kinds of movement that you expect in the lower grades. And so just by the nature of what progress looks like in content areas, you might disadvantage high schools with this framework if that isn't captured in some way, and how you set up your divisions, or maybe having different point tables for elementary and middle versus high school, for example. So that's something I think, using Leslie's idea of doing some simulations, I think that would be very good to do, so that you're not caught when you go to press, that it turns out that growth is much slower in high school, which is to be expected, and so you're going to see well, you don't have high school growth, but at the end of middle school, that all of the end of middle school, in grades 7 and 8, for example, that those students have a very difficult time moving to the right part of the table or making progress across the table, and so you might want to simulate that before you move forward.
Pete, can I ask you to consider a couple of quick follow-up questions here? So I assume that your advice is related to the distinctions within level, like apprentice low, apprentice high, as opposed to, like apprentice to proficient, so as to avoid creating thresholds that aren't tied to our performance level. And so that's sort of one question I wanted to invite your reaction to. And I think it's confounded with the fact that, the value tables represent the performance that's already sort of inherent with the assessment. And I'm wondering how much degrees of freedom there are here once you tether this to value tables to overcome that. And maybe that's your answer, is that it's really within level is where you've got the pliability, and you should exercise that to the extent that you can. And the second part of my follow-up is I would just be interested in hearing if there are any particular indicators that we might look at. So is it just looking at impact across grades? Would there be other things like, putting this next to like a growth percentile or something to get a sense? Like, any other thoughts you have about how you could evaluate their extent to which they have reasonable transitions across grades? Because I think it's such an interesting area to explore. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think, to a large extent, you answered your questions with your recommendations. I think understanding the effect size of progress across by level and grade, so you can see the progression as you move. And here you can look within level, of course, because there's going to be some variability there. But even across some of the levels, it would be good to know. Obviously, as you said, your degrees of freedom for change there is very, very limited, but at least understanding what that looks like. And you can do that with the effect size of growth. You can look at with percentiles, certainly, growth percentiles could give you some of that information. And the other flexibility you have is whether you have a separate table altogether so you don't have flexibility. You can't create new levels, obviously, for middle and elementary school, but you can assign different points, recognizing that some movement is going to be much more difficult in 8th grade than it is in 4th grade. And so you might consider rewarding that in a different way. So maybe that's where your flexibility lies.
Super helpful. Thanks, Pete.
Corinne, did you have a comment? Yep.
I unraised my hand and started talking. I'm sorry. This is Corinne Manley. I wanted to second, Jennifer, you're telling us the logic behind it and how it's gone through stakeholders and where they, where the nitty gritty came into the corners and stuff was really helpful. I also just wanted to second, making plans for how to think about those people scoring right near the cut scores and with more cut scores than you have in just the proficiency levels. There's more of that. So second, Dr. King's and all thinking about the air. I was wondering, similar to the other accountability pieces, have you all ironed out in the new policy or legislation how to handle unique cases? So what do you do with retained students, given that this is last year and this year, if they're retained in a grade? How do you handle new students to the state? Who's included, who's not? Where does mobility shake out if they move right toward the end of the year? So I know you have those things very clearly for other parts of your accountability, like when students are in and what school they're attributed to. But I just wanted to reflect that because this is over 2 years now, I think there's just more of that, and wanted to hear a little bit about what you all had planned.
So we've had a bit of experience with growth in the past. We've had two different models, one in 2018 and the other in 2019. And so we've engaged with this type of 2 years of data before. We do have business rules that are that let me say that were in place at that time. I take your suggestion that we need to get those out and pull them forward and revisit those. We've not taken that step at this point because we're trying to get the overall model and the overall direction at this point. But we will do that and take that good advice.
It may be good. I'd let other people chime in who maybe done this more at a state level, but it may be good to have some of that in line before doing the impact data, because some of those issues would influence the results in deciding who to include and also.
Okay, any other comments on individual student growth? We've got a couple of more topics here. Okay, Shara, I think that I'll turn it over to you for chronic absenteeism.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. So for the chronic absenteeism indicator, if you'll remember the definition that House Bill 257 put in place, and I'll just read it for you real quick here as a reminder. Chronic absenteeism is defined as student engagement as measured by chronic absenteeism, which shall be defined as a student missing 10% or more of yearly school time for excused or unexcused reasons throughout the school year. So I believe we talked to you last time that there were two different ways to calculate this. The federal calculation was based on school days missed, while the state currently is measured by minutes of instructional time missed. And as Jennifer noted, we have been out with various stakeholders since House Bill 257 was passed. And of course, we've been in front of the board. So we're moving towards that federal calculation, basing it on the school days missed. So with that federal calculation. ESSA states that it must be measured in the half year or at least 50 days. So we put together a little example of what that 50-day rule example would look like, because as you probably know, just as a reminder, that all of our other indicators has historically been based on the 100-day rule, with the exception of grad rate, which is something separate. But so we're looking at this one being the 50-day rule. So if we have a student who's chronically absent for 50 days in Carter County, say that that student had some health issues during that 50 days while he or she were in Carter County, and then moved to Bath County for 120 days, but health improved and wasn't considered chronically absent. So with the 50-day rule, the student is accountable at Carter and Bath. So Carter County would get be responsible for that chronic absenteeism. So again, rather than having that 100-day rule with the track back, where only Bath County would be responsible for what happened in Carter County and in Bath. This way, it breaks it up, and Carter County would be responsible for the time that the student was chronically absent. And as you probably remember, this was not a part of the original package that we took over, or that Dr. Fletcher took over. This was something that the legislators brought to the table and wanted to implement. So with that, I will pause, and I believe we already have a hand up.
Go ahead, Pete.
Yeah, so I think the 50-day rule is certainly a reasonable idea. I guess the main question I have along with that is, does that mean that the accountability is going to be weighted so that for Carter, they get 40% weight on the chronic absenteeism, or whatever 50 out of 170 is? I guess it's not 40%, but are you going to weight it, or do they get a full chronic absent score based on just the 50 days?
Well, that's a good question, Pete, because the next section is
Sorry.
is the weights, if I'm not mistaken, and Jennifer is going to go over that with you.
Well,
So,
and just I'll jump in here, because I think Pete's asking something a little bit
Oh,
different
is he asking
than
something
the
different?
weighting
Okay.
across indicators.
All right.
He's sort of asking if you would weight a student within the indicator based on kind of the proportion of their enrollment that represents, or something like that, Pete. Maybe I didn't say that quite right, but that's different than the indicator weighting. What he's trying to acknowledge is that you would have students that are part of that indicator who were not enrolled in your school for the full year. And Pete, to answer your question, as I understand it, and someone at KTAC can correct me, but as I understand it, the 50-day rule says if you are enrolled for 50 days, we're counting you in this indicator, and all students are counted equally as long as they are enrolled for the minimum of 50 days. So a student could be enrolled for the full year versus students who are enrolled for the 50 days.
That's correct, Laura.
Can I ask a follow-up question to that?
Sure.
So within the regs, it said that if you're absent half a day, that counts as a day. I mean, that counts as a full day, half a day or more. Did I read that correctly?
Yes.
Yes.
So when you're counting days, do you then count to create the chronic absent total? Do you round up to 1 and then count, or do you count all the partial days and then count that as the total number of absences? So, because if you were absent 3 half days, that's a day and a half, right? Or if you round up first, then 3 half days is 3. clearly a very different picture. And so I'm just curious which approach you're going to take.
I'll let Jennifer answer that, but I don't believe we're rounding up the days. Oh, and Jessica.
Yes, I was gonna ask, I was looking to see if Jesse was on here.
Yes,
Jesse
yes.
Carlton is a expert in our chronic absenteeism because attendance is not in the Office of Assessment and Accountability. It's in the Office of Finance and Operations. So Jesse is here for just these type of questions. So I'll turn it over to her.
So hello, everybody. My name is Jessie Carlton. As Jennifer said, you've probably never seen me or heard from me before, and that's okay. We do work with attendance. Chronic absenteeism falls in under ours. And yes, you will, the way the federal definition works is you will do that rounding before. You're not going to piece together 3 half days to make 1.5. That's kind of how our state system works, is you piece together all the little bits of time to figure out the total time. But when we talked with the DPPs and others, the federal definition uses that, day. And so you have that 50% cutoff to say either I am absent this day or I'm not absent this day if I've hit the 50%. And so then that's 1 day counted towards the absences of your whole enrolled days to see if you hit that 10% of your days enrolled. But then you also have 50 days laid on top of it. So I hope that answers your question.
That was clear, Jesse, and I just want to note that, and you referenced, kind of federal data submissions, so with EdFax and previously like civil rights data collection. That's typically
Yes.
how that works. I'm not aware of other practices. Pete,
Well,
did you have
I'm
a
always a big
response?
fan of, well, I'm always a big fan of arguing with the feds. So
Please,
I would
yeah.
argue it creates a disincentive for students because oftentimes you find that students they leave at lunch and don't come back, but at least they're making an effort to show up, or they skip first period because that's calculus. So,
Right.
there's I think the one size fits all. I mean, I know there's limitations here, and this is thinking, a little pie in the sky, but I think to maximize student attendance to the extent possible, you want to create incentives for schools to not just write them off if they've missed, half the day, but to really work with them. So that would be my only
I do
that
want to
would be my
acknowledge,
comment.
though, that this would, and Jesse, please correct me if I'm misunderstanding, because I hear that if you miss a half day, that counts as a full day, but are you collecting in half day intervals actually?
We
Or are
actually
you
collect,
only rounding? Is it 0 or 1?
it's 0 or 1.
Okay,
for,
gotcha.
for this, you'll be 0 or 1. And I will say the state definition, that's kind of what it's talking to. There's a lot more nuance, and you get a lot closer to those. I'm just skipping calculus every morning. I do know that this does allow things, and the DPP spoke to this. It gives credit to the families and the students who are trying to maximize their time there and setting those doctor's appointments, those orthodontist appointments, those things that every kid has either at the first or the end of the day, trying to miss at least they can for that. And I will say that kind of getting caught for every minute, that does go into Kentucky's funding system, which is totally different for this. But we're kind of funded on a half day, whole day, which is a different calculation, different conversation. But you can, quote unquote, get dinged or lose funding for those students who skip out the second half of the day. So you would lose that on our funding side, but not necessarily with this on the accountability side with this federal calculation. It gets into the weeds very quickly. Hope I didn't go too far.
I think we probably could move on to waiting, Jennifer, if you're ready. And you're muted right now, just so you know.
Oh, thank you,
Yep.
Laura. So the weighting is also directed by and oversight by the ESSA, the Every Student Succeeds Act. These are the current weights that we have in our current system, and you can see the values here that the previous Kentucky Board of Education set on those and you can see that they're different at elementary, middle, and high. I'll note for you that a couple of changes that we'll see here in the next slide, that elementary and middle previously had different values for reading and math, science, and social studies. And also another difference is that high school has post-secondary at 20% and graduation at 6%, with reading and math at 45. So if you'll go to the next slide, you'll see that elementary and middle are currently the same. You'll note that the inclusion now of that individual student growth is there, as well as then the chronic absenteeism. You'll note also that the state assessment results in science and social studies that used to have writing in it, but now is, because writing was removed from the statutory requirement for being tested, is now just science and social studies. So you'll see that those are the same at elementary and middle. So this board had a little bit different approach. And then also at the bottom here with high schools, you'll note that the reading and math sits at 40, and though that extra 5% was added over here onto post-secondary readiness. And they left the English learner progress and the same percentage in the table, whereas they left chronic absenteeism the same as the climate and safety survey percentage that it was. Just because of the coloration on the columns, that is to note that those indicators have to have the substantial weight. So those combined weight of those academic indicators must be substantially higher than the others. So you'll note that those all add up to 51% or greater. So these are the weights and the values that our current Kentucky Board of Education is moving forward. All right. Shara, I'll turn it over to you unless there are any comments, hands up, or anything on the waiting.
I don't see
All right.
any.
All right, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, so now House Bill 257 did not change our English language proficiency, but while we're updating, the federal government provides some flexibilities on this, and so we are we are moving with some of those with the flexibility option to that the federal government allows. So again, we have been out in front of several stakeholders with the two options, option 1 and option 2, which option 1 is what we do now, is the student will test in a couple of content areas or a few questions, and then they're exempt their first year. With option 2, it brings in more testing for the student and brings them into the accountability by year, starts with year 2. So so beginning with this school year, we'll implement SS Flexibility Option 2. So English learner students that are enrolled in U.S. schools for less than 240 days must complete all grade level Kentucky summative assessments in reading, mathematics, science, and social studies. And EL students must participate if they are enrolled on or before the first day of the district's testing window. So moving in that direction for our EL students in this upcoming school year. So here's what it would look like in in the accountability system. So those students would test, but their scores would just be reported in the school report card, but not included in the accountability system. Then in year 2, of course, their scores would be reported once again, but for this year, for that year 2, they would be included in the reading and mathematics in the individual student growth indicator. And then by year 3, they would be fully implemented into the accountability system. And then, of course, those EL students would continue to complete those annual English language proficiency assessments. So with that, I will pause and see if anybody has any questions or if Jennifer has anything that she wants to add. Okay. All right. So we've talked a lot about where we have been and all the good findings that and updates that we've provided for you here. But as we continue with this regulation, we will continue. We've talked about, we've had that first read with the board. Then we're going to continue to consult with the commissioners' advisory groups throughout the remainder of this month and throughout September. And then heading back to the board for the second read of this regulation, the 1st of October. And then we'll move into that public comment period and all the while working to update our state plan. So I will pause there and I see Jennifer's come back on camera and I'll see if she has anything to add before we go to break.
So I'll just, if you'll go to the next slide, just appreciate your thoughts and your feedback. We've gotten some great suggestions to move forward today and to look at various impact data. The center, we've been working with them and they've done fantastic of providing graphs and charts, and I love Kyla's memos that she does for us, and so able to move things forward due to the support that we get from this group. All right.
So
well, thank you. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So just revisiting those thoughts before we head into break, and I turn it over to Kyla, or to thinking of Kyla, but to Laura. Sorry, Laura.
No, that's okay. I did see a hand up. Leslie, did you have I saw both Leslie and Pete's hands up briefly and then fluttering a bit. So okay, I see hands back up. So we'll start with you, Pete, since your hand is first right now.
All right. So one question and then one comment. The first question is for the graduation rate, the points for that. Is there any distinction by the type of diploma, or is it all the same?
That's really interesting, Pete, that you asked that, because previously we've only had one diploma type in Kentucky that has contributed to the accountability, and that's just a regular diploma. And we had they called it the alternate diploma, but it was did not count toward graduation. It was more of a certificate of attendance or participation. You may have seen the markup within the regulation that we've got legislation out of the 2026 legislative session that directs a new diploma type that is called a state-defined alternate diploma that would then meet the requirements of ESSA to be able to give credit for the students who participate in that alternate program. And achieve that state-defined alternate diploma. There's another, it's called a diploma, but it's more like what we have now. The modified diploma is more like a certificate of attendance that will not contribute positively toward the graduation rate.
So I mean, it's, you know, to the extent there's desire to incentivize one versus the other, that could count. You know, you might consider weighting them a little differently within, or, you know, I mean, that's adds some more nuances, and it may not be worth the trouble, but it is something to think about. And then the other comment I was going to make was, and you're probably doing this, but I would certainly want to see what the new weighting for your accountability system, how that relates to aggregate student characteristics of the schools, because it's fairly heavily weighted for status. If you think of reading, math, science, and social studies, there's a lot of status points there. And those tend to be related to background characteristics. So you may want to keep an eye on that. And then the second thing you probably want to keep an eye on is what the effective weights are, to see how much they deviate from your from the weights that you've presented on the tables, because those effective weights might turn out to be quite different and may be fine with you, or they may not. And so, but it is something you want to monitor as you're moving forward.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Pete.
One thing I do want to flag before, Leslie, I do see your hand there, just on the topic of graduation rate and that state-defined alternate diploma. Something that might be of interest to the TAC is noting that ESSA does allow for states to count the state-defined alternate diploma in the adjusted cohort graduation rate. That's how Kentucky is able to do this. But there is a corresponding requirement in order for students to earn a state-defined alternate diploma, they have to participate in the alternate assessment. So I want to just draw that line for all of you as something that we might want to kind of consider examining in the longer term potential impacts for the change in policy on testing practices. And then Leslie, I'll pass it off to you.
Thank you, Laura. And this is Leslie Kang. Actually, I'm glad that Pete spoke first, because then I can sort of just say yes, because I was actually along the same lines around the evaluating the effective weight versus what you have in the table, which is what we could call nominal weight. I think that's a really good suggestion, and it builds on kind of an earlier idea, just like earlier when I met with the individual student growth indicator. You can build a simulation to kind of with real data to see how those values would change the indicator values. You could do something similar here. You could just at a higher level, you could actually play around with it. I'm assuming the weights are still pliable. You could still actually build a simulator that actually is able to compute, you know, the effective weight, and that the effective weight just often has to do with just how much variance that each schools have with each of the indicators. So you actually see which ones actually truly matter more in terms of statistically, and you could simulate that by simply having those values based on real school data. And if those weights could still be adjusted, and that's one thing I did note in the pre-read you gave us. There were weights in the regulation, but they were slightly different than what you showed it in the PowerPoint. So I assume that since that regulation was written, you've had a few more minor adjustments to it as well. So it just indicates maybe these are still things that you can adjust. So in that case, maybe having a simulation that could evaluate the effective weight and looking at how schools, you know, how different values play out, that actually can go into your standard setting process as well, would maybe helpful, maybe a helpful tool to have.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments or questions from TAC members? You guys, I just have to say, we are right on time, and it's just like a little joy as a facilitator when we switched to our last topic also right on time. It's deeply satisfying. So I'm not going to waste another breath. We have a 15-minute break on the agenda. We will reconvene on the hour to discuss the EL reclassification study. Thanks everybody for your contributions.
Called
Thank you.
measurement precision.
There.
Thanks.
Well, welcome back. Thank you all. Hope you had were able to stretch your legs, comfort break. At this point in time, we are going to transition to our last kind of full topic before we kind of turn our attention to planning for the next meeting, reviewing the recommendations for today. I will note, I originally said that we'd review the recommendations as we went. It's not a huge list, so I think we have plenty of time reserved at the end of the meeting for that. So I'm going to pass it off to Art and Emily from HUMRO to talk about how they're working to understand the impact of the WIDA Access for All standard setting.
Thank you. Let's see. I think I took control, but maybe I didn't. Hold on. Sorry.
If you want to try advancing a slide, then you can.
Yeah, it's not. I thought I was. And
Okay.
It's not advancing. Let's see. Oh, wait, hold on. Let me try this. There. Okay. Got it now. Now I know
Great.
it's sorry.
All right. Great.
Okay.
Good.
Hi, everybody. Emily Dickinson with HUMRO, and I'm going to talk a little bit about our plan for the meeting to review the reclassification criteria that are applied to the WIDA access scores to determine if a student is ready to exit multilingual services and supports. And Art Thacker, my colleague, is here as well. I'm going to go through the slides. Art will be here to jump in if I forget to say something, and also to help answer questions that come along the way. So just to provide a little background, WIDA released a new English language development standards framework in 2020. And then in spring 2026 was the first administration of the access assessment that is aligned to this framework. Then WIDA just completed a standard setting in July, so just last month. And so, because of all these changes, WIDA recommends that their member states do a review of their current reclassification criteria. HUMRO conducted a similar process for the alternate access last fall. And I believe Katie provided as a read ahead our report from that work. And we're intending for this work to parallel that. We're just going to kind of describe to you our process. One thing we know we'll be able to do more of that we couldn't do for the alternate was provide more data for the panelists to review. So that's one thing that we're going to ask you to weigh in on our planned data analyses. Leslie, please go ahead.
Hi, yeah, this is Leslie. Sorry, Emily, for interrupting you, but
No.
but I appreciate the pre-read, and I'm looking forward to getting into it. I guess before you get into that, just one quick question, because I know this is pretty hot off the press since the standard setting just heard last month. When WIDA gave this recommendation, did they make any claims about comparability about the proficiency levels between what the old WIDA and the new WIDA are? For instance, if is a 4.5 still mean a 4.5 across these two, before and after the standard setting?
That's a great question. And I remember that for the alternate, their guidance was that the assessment had become more difficult.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm assuming that's the same thing here. But now that you ask that, I don't know if I've read that explicitly about access, but I'm assuming it's the same.
Yeah, I think the official guidance from WIDA, Leslie, is that they should not be necessarily considered to be equivalent at the classification level. WIDA is providing states with a concordance table so that they can use that if they have systems for accountability that go back multiple years to generate their accountability indices. And that, sort of will allow states to bridge the gap. So they have those concordance tables, but the classifications don't necessarily mean the same thing.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Art.
Just coming in, Art, to say that's exactly my understanding as well. Yep.
Thank you. Okay. So we're currently recruiting subject matter experts for a virtual meeting that we are going to hold in November or December. Katie collected information on folks who are interested, and that information included their experience and qualifications. And so now we are communicating with those folks to identify a meeting date that works for the most qualified, most people that are also qualified. So at minimum, we expect these people to be currently providing instruction to English learners. We're targeting 15 panelists that are going to reflect a mixture of grade level experience and a mixture of content area experience. But we want them to be currently providing instruction to English learners at minimum. So I actually just sent out the survey yesterday to start that process of determining our meeting date. But it looks like we should be able to hit that target of 15. So the next couple of slides are about our planned meeting processes. We're going to begin the meeting with a discussion of each proficiency level descriptor in each of the 4 language domains. So listening, reading, and speaking and writing, they're going to have a proficiency level descriptor for each grade level tested. So we're going to have our panelists discuss, and we'll document their discussion of the language skills and abilities that an exiting student would be expected to demonstrate at each of the tested grade levels or grade bands. So then after that discussion, we will give them an electronic form that they will fill out their independently, identify the PLD at which they think a student would be when they're ready to exit support, and they would have a separate rating for each domain at this point. And then we'll do a quick summary behind the scenes of the ratings, and we'll present those back to the group and have discussion. After that, we're going to present results from several data analyses that I will go into more detail about on the next slide or a later slide. But we want to present these data analyses to them, discuss, make sure everybody's clear about what the data are saying, and then we will give another form to do a second round of independent rating. Same thing, pick a PLD for each domain that they think a student would be at when they're ready to exit supports. And so we'll collect those, turn those around, present those back to the group. And then at this point, like I said, we will be have been rating domains separately, but the reclassification criteria is 1 score. And so in that final discussion, we will talk about the weighting of the different domains, and then just kind of provide that and work that into the discussion so that we have everybody provide a final recommendation for a single reclassification criteria score that is across the domains.
And Emily, I'm going to interrupt, and Suzanne has a question. So.
Oh yeah, I just saw that. Sorry, I was in the zone. Sorry, Suzanne, please go ahead.
No problem. This is Suzanne Lane. Nice to see you, Emily. I have just a couple of questions, and it's primarily based on the previous report. So one of my questions is, do you provide any surveys intermittently in terms of if they understand what their goal is, and at the end, in terms of if they're comfortable with the final outcome? Because I didn't see anything like that in the report.
Yeah, and I know that is typical with standard settings, and we did not do anything like that for the alternate assessment process. And we could incorporate that into. Could we incorporate that as in the document or the survey in which they put their ratings? Also add some questions about just a level of understanding things, or should that be a separate?
Usually, I believe it's a separate question if they're understanding, to know if they understand the goal, if they understand the task, just so that you can intervene if necessary. And then definitely at the end, asking them questions about the quality, like in a typical standard setting,
So-
because this
yeah.
is a standard setting, and in particular with their comfort level with the final results.
Yeah, and I think that that's a thing that we can incorporate, Suzanne, into the new study, and it's a thing that we probably should have done for the alternate and didn't.
Yeah.
We did have a pretty open discussion with the panel at the end of the alternate workshop about sort of where they landed and their comfort level with it, because it was pretty different from what the previous cut score was. But we didn't collect formal data via survey for that. So,
Yeah,
And
and that's probably a good idea.
Yeah.
If you took notes on that, or
Yeah.
you might want to just include that. And one
Yeah.
of the other things I noticed in the previous report, the correlations, you only identified the value for those that were significant, and that seemed unusual. You were looking at the correlation between the access and then the summatives.
Well,
And
I know that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Finish.
I would just report all correlations, and you can, because the significance is less important because of the sample size. But I would just report all of them. I have a few other things, but I'm going to let you go on.
Okay. Yeah, and that's I think we left out the non significant correlations because of the sample size issue, but we can definitely report them all. And just to also tag on it, Leslie, I'm going to come to you. Sorry, but I will know we do this. This is one big panel. Instead, it's not separate panels. I mean, just like so, all of our panels are participating in the same, or all our panelists are participating in the same meetings. And all the Humro staff are there. So there's not, at least we don't have that issue of panels potentially having kind of different experiences. But I agree that, you know, we should add these survey questions. Leslie, please go ahead.
Oh, well, thank you, Emily. Actually, I was actually going to build off of what Suzanne mentioned about the correlations, but I see you actually haven't gone through this slide, so I could save it because then it's something you may actually address. I guess I'll ask the question to see if you address it. I was looking at the same correlation table in your pre-read, and you know, besides what Suzanne noted, I was wondering like what's the expect? I know the alt access group is a very a small sample size, unique group, but what would be the expectation would be the correlation between access and the KSA? So that's a question I was wondering, because again, that table has a lot of asterisks around it, but I'm just curious what would you go in, what you would expect to see. So maybe you're going to address that as you do as you guys get to this slide.
Well, I'll start, and I think Art will probably jump in, but I mean, I think we would expect it to be positive, but not necessarily very high, because these are different constructs, but we expect there to be some relation. And so I think, I don't think we have a specific range in mind, but yeah, definitely positive, and at least I'd say weak to moderate, probably.
Yeah, and I think that's we didn't start with any preconceived notions about how big the correlation should be, Leslie. I think one of the reasons that we wanted to show folks this that were on the panel is so that they wouldn't sort of create expectations based on what they see in the regular assessment, and sort of make judgments about well, we see about this many kids that are proficient in reading, so and showing the correlations and showing that they're weak, and that they're not that's not a thing that you can automatically sort of use to make judgments about the English language proficiency test, I think is the sort of the big point of providing that data.
Yeah, I'll let you, because that leads to a follow, but I don't want to take away from Emily's presentation, so I'll say the question.
Oh yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I mean, and I'm really not going, very deep in our descriptions at this point. But I mean, I think that any questions you raise are, valuable to us, because we're still kind of putting together our analysis plan. But we are thinking at minimum, we're going to provide the panel with some descriptive statistics so they can just kind of see the range of scores on the two different assessments. We're talking about the Access and the Kentucky Summative Assessment. And then looking at correlations that we've already been talking about. We thought we would also look at some decision consistency. So given, different, using the different possible criteria for reclassification, how would kind of reclassification on the Access kind of coincide with levels of proficiency on KSA? So like, would those decisions be, what level of consistency would we see? And then we also would do some logistic regression predicting KSA proficiency from Access score. And I mean, conceptually, there's because we're talking about exiting students from language support, and presumably, they're ready to be perform proficiently without any language support. I think that's another, that's a reason why we're kind of looking at that relationship between when they're, moved out of that language support need and how that is, kind of associated with proficiency on KSA. But anyway, yeah, so I invite like more in the weeds questions you might have. Yeah, Leslie, thanks.
Yeah, this is Leslie. Thank you, Emily, for that explanation. And I think this builds on why I asked the earlier question, because the other two, the decision consistency and the logistic regression, looking at how, the relationship between EL, reclassification and KSA proficiency, that they're inherent under that is, I don't know if convergent validity is the right word here, but it is one of those things that it is a piece of data that I think would be helpful for your panelists to see, oh, there's this relationship between an EL when they exit and how they're going to do on KSA. And this is bringing back some, at one point I did help a state try to reset their reclassification exit criteria. And this was actually a piece of data that was very helpful in the sense that they see, okay, if I set my proficiency level for EL classification at this score point, this is how many, and because this presumes you have data that links the EL's, KSA score and EL score. You could actually have, show them, okay, and this is what the proficiency rate on KSA would be for this group of students. And so it serves as a good reasonableness check, a piece of data they can look and consider. Because I don't know how correlations themselves, how they would react to just seeing a correlation, but if they're able to see, oh, this is what EL classification, reclassification relates to it. But of course, that presumes that the correlation is positive, or at least that's why I asked the earlier question. The other thing that actually ends up being useful in that context was if you could actually also bring in the proficiency rates of KSA in general, right? So that includes non-ELs in this case, because there were cases where the panel was actually thinking of a specific proficiency level for EL, but that relates to a proficiency rate that was actually way higher than, way lower than the actual proficiency level of the general population, which is telling them that they're actually being a little bit too rigorous when it comes to this EL proficiency. So that ends up being a good additional data that could use to help them find out whether their cut score is reasonable or not.
Great idea. Yes, I agree that we should include that. Thank you. Pete?
Yeah, I'm gonna sort of piggyback on Leslie's comments, but I'm gonna go in reverse order and a little bit backwards. I think you want to be very careful with logistic regression. On the other hand, if proficiency is your outcome on KSA, because if you just use that and you're trying to find a point where you predict proficiency very well, you may set you likely will set your cut point too high. It'll be too rigorous, because if your expectation is that an English language learner is proficient, that expectation is higher than the expectation for your general population who aren't 100% proficient at any grade level. So I think you got to balance that, and I think that's what Leslie was saying as well. And if not, that's what my interpretation was. So it can go both ways. You need to take into account that not everyone's proficient. I think the second thing is, I think the correlations are interesting. I think what's a useful to demonstrate the relationship, I think what I found to be useful is if you do a box plot by by access scores or yeah, by the composite levels, I guess. And you can do KSA as the outcome, even both math and reading, and you can see a nice upward trend. And you can see where it actually crossed the proficiency threshold at the median. And I think that demonstrates to folks that yes, there's an upward trend, but overall the correlation is largely the correlation across the entire spectrum of scores is largely irrelevant because you're not making decisions about the entire spectrum of scores and the relationships. You're trying to find a point to reclassify students. And to that end, and I'm a little, and what you explained made a lot of sense for the alternative access, but I'm a little confused in terms of talking about just the performance level descriptives and having them give give votes for different the different domains because the discussion isn't going to be around the performance level descriptives. It's going to be around within one. You're not deciding between 3 and 7. You're deciding where along between 4 and 5 you're going to be. So I'm not entirely sure how you're going to limit that discussion to make a nuanced decision like that. Secondly, if you rate the individual domain scores, that sort of presumes you're creating some sort of either a composite or a conjunctive rule, and then conjunctive rules are very difficult for anyone to ever exit because they're conjunctive. And if you're going to create a composite and weight them, why are you not using the composite that WIDA creates already? That is a composite. So I think there's some nuances there that need to be worked out for me to understand better how this process is going to lead you to a reclassification score.
Yeah, and so Pete, I get what you're saying, and I want KDE to jump in because part of this is sort of because of the history of the way that KDE has approached the EL proficiency assessment. So in the past, KDE has used 4.5 as this is the point at which you exit, and that 4.5 is a composite score. It's not conjunctive, but it's based on the individual, components of, the 0 through 5 that WIDA produces. And so you would need to get, 2 5s and 2 4s essentially to move out of that, the English supports. And for the reasons that you mentioned, that Kentucky doesn't want to go to a conjunctive sort of system, but this is sort of the way in the past that they've gotten to that 4.5, or I guess it could be 4.2, it could be 4, it could be 3, whatever. But that's the way that they've gotten to it, and so we sort of built this to conserve sort of that methodology. Now it's open whether that methodology is a reasonable methodology to conserve, but I don't think that they want to go to a place where they're considering the different components of WIDA separately. And I don't know if they want to set an overall sort of composite score, because right now the system sort of weights everything evenly. And I think that that's an intentional decision at Kentucky. But I'll defer to my KDE folks to sort of jump in and correct any dumb thing that I just said.
Can I re-weigh in on that? So yeah, I was not at all suggesting you should go to a conjunctive score, because I think we're all in agreement there. But I am interested in, and it might be useful for your data analysis to compare, let's say, within the range of 4.2 to 5, or whatever the reasonable range might be now, of an equally weighted composite based on what the analysis you're doing here versus the composite level that WIDA creates on its own, because that composite level is not equally weighted.
Right.
And it is my guess that composite is going to be more highly related to your content scores than is the equally weighted composite. And so that might be useful information for your panelists to dare I say, to use the word weight again, or consider whether they want to use their equally weighted one versus the, 4.5 equally weighted versus a 4.5 that's WIDA created on a composite that's not equally weighted. And you can show the relationships there, because they're slightly different in meaning, obviously, because of the unequal weights. So that might be useful.
Yep.
Yeah, great idea.
Yeah, I think we should probably, create some options for how we present that to the panelists and provide that to KDE and let them sort of decide sort of what level of complexity they're willing to be okay with and how we should be presenting that. But yeah, I think it's a good idea to at least, have the data to put in front of them so they can consider it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and so KDE, just to preview to you, you will be getting some slides early on, and we'll ask you to weigh in on these things, and we'll remind you of this discussion and kind of what needs to be considered. We've already started on this slide. We've already been providing recommendations, so this has been very helpful. But I think we had a half an hour, so there's 3 minutes if we want to be perfect timing. Again, if anybody has anything to fill up the last 3 minutes, but Leslie, thank you.
Yeah, this is us. Yeah, sure. I'll try to do the 2 minutes to get us to 3:30. I'm in a measurement position here. Oh, actually, it was more just actually helping you because it's in the report. You do display the impact data that was shown during the access, out access.
Yeah.
Table 4 is the impact data display during the workshop. That's what it's labeled. And I was actually having trouble understanding what was in that table because what you have there, just to try to verbally describe it, you have columns that represent percent that were reclassified for the different levels. And then the final column is percent recommend. I assume rec means recommended for access. And I was having a hard time understanding how those values jive because I'm interpreting each of the earlier columns as the if you set the cut, for instance, at 1.0, here's how much people would be reclassified, and then you set at 2, it'd be at this much. And so maybe this is what maybe this is what Pete's saying, that they're actually not going to set it at 1, 2, 3, or 4. They're going to set it somewhere in between. So is the recommended column ultimately where they end up setting it, and you did some way to kind of come up with that middle value, and that's what the final column represents, the impact data?
Well, I think the final column was the percent on the regular access.
Oh, is it regular access? Okay.
I think the percent that had. I need to go back. I didn't have it open. I'm sorry. Do you remember, Art, off the top of your head? I could be wrong. I'm trying to open it up. I didn't have the report open, and I should have. Let's see.
Yeah. Sorry, Emily. I trust
No,
that you
that's
remember
okay.
the nuances of the report. So
I should have.
I think it does.
Expected.
I'm reading it now, and I think it is what you said, Emily, unless I'm reading it wrong. Kevin, do you
That's what I
see
took
right
as
above
well.
that?
Yeah. So, yeah, that was the percent reclassified
On regular
on the current criteria for access,
Oh,
the
okay.
regular access assessment.
Perfect.
So
All
just to
right.
give them some context.
Thank you. That makes sense. And that makes sense why this would be useful for the committee. Thank you.
Yep.
And look,
no
we
problem.
got us to 3:29. So someone can fill in the
Good job. Great effort.
We actually have longer on the agenda for this
Oh,
one.
we do?
So
Oh,
yes, we have until 3:45. It'd be fine to transition early, but
okay.
if there are more
Well,
questions, I'm not going to cut
this
those off by any means.
This is the time of day when we like things starting to end early, right? All right. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate the feedback, and I've taken notes, and we will definitely incorporate these things into our study. Thanks.
Thank you guys for the time.
Okay, are we ready to transition to reviewing the recommendations, TAC members? Okay, I can guide us through as we've been going, Laura and Kyla and I have been trying to listen for the prominent points from the TAC and to craft those into some candidate recommendations for your review and consideration. And I'm trying to think, Laura, what's the best way for us to, I think they have access to this through the landing page.
Yep, they sure do.
Okay.
We
So
typically ask folks just to use like suggest mode so we can acknowledge where there are changes.
yeah, so let me invite the TAC to pop into the document, which you should have through the landing page. And I'll give voice to some of them as we go through, but what I would love to just give the TAC some time to do and yeah, using suggest mode so we can see what changes you're proposing. We can go through these. So when it comes to accountability, the first recommendation that we recorded that's really related to cautions and for understanding the relationship among potentially competing college readiness assessments. So you can see here, if the procurement process results in 2 or more assessments, then it won't be defensible to treat them as interchangeable, at least to an extent that we would expect from an equated standard. And the TAC suggested some evidence that might be brought to bear to support those interpretations, such as independent alignment studies or analyses that predict comparable post-secondary outcomes. So this one here is mostly a caveat that comparability wouldn't be interchangeable absent some of that additional evidence. And again, if I don't give voice to something that you think should be included, then please either stop me and weigh in or put something in the document. I'll keep going, and again, I'll just invite the TAC to consider these all collectively. There were a number of recommendations that pertain to the accountability regulations that the team covered. The first has to do with the TAC's good advice to have a initiative to communicate well about how to interpret and use those results and the lack of comparability. There was a recommendation, there's a couple recommendations about value tables that we tried to capture. There was some conversation about making sure the thresholds are appropriate. This mostly applies to the thresholds within levels. And there's an invitation that further scrutiny can be applied by examining score ranges within performance levels to, with respect to conditional standard error of measure, make sure that those transition points reflected real progress and didn't just pick up on noise. And then I think Pete gave voice to this really nicely, evaluating the consistency of classifications across grades and school types as a way to, maybe you might even use a vertical articulation lens, if you like, to help inspect these value tables. On the conversation about attendance, the primary TAC input there was a discussion about how an absence is measured. And we discovered that if it meets that threshold for a half-day absence, that it's recorded as a full day. And I think the TAC was interested in looking at the degree to which an alternative approach could better detect incremental progress and might better incentivize improvement efforts. So I recorded that as consider evaluating a more fine-grained approach to provide that information. And then there was discussion about looking at the effective, the nominal versus effective weights. The department showed the proposed weights for the system. I think the TAC rightly said there's both the intended weights and the actual weights, and looking at some analyses to discover the extent to which they're correspondent would be another good use of some follow-through analyses. And obviously we want to make sure those are consistent with the state's policy priorities. And we just finished our conversation about the classification study. I think early on, there was advice that some kind of readiness check or a brief survey to confirm that the panelists understand their role and the purpose and they're prepared would be a nice addition. And then I'd particularly like to TAC's eyes on this because this conversation was pretty wide ranging, these second 2 bullets here. I think one was really trying to collect advice where I heard the TAC say, we want to make sure that we're giving the panel good information to understand the relationship between the alt access and the alt KSA, but let's not overly weight or overly emphasize proficiency, which could set the rigor a little higher than is intended. So step back, look at the distribution of score points on the KSA rather than a single score point, and look at that trend across the selected range of access score points. Could be a very informative way for the panelists to understand what candidate approaches might be prioritized. And
Chris,
then
I'm going to hop in just really quickly there. Sorry, I just want to make one little edit to just make sure we document this. I know we were talking about alt access, and so it makes sense that is what we were saying since you're looking at last year's report. But the recommendation would be to include evidence from the KSA, right? Because we're looking at the general access for all. So I just wanted to, it was probably just a little misspeak, but I just want to make sure that we're consistent about that, since we're kind of looking forward to how to respond to the recent standard setting for access for all.
Thanks for.
Sorry to interrupt, but just want to make sure
that was
we're all on the same page. Great, thanks.
It's an important clarification, and I did get a little confused by that, so thanks. And then lastly, there's this note here about the composite could obscure our understanding of the relationship between domains and KSA performance. And so looking at ways to sort of break out those domains under the TAC. So we don't want to make them conjunctive and have that be too much of an influence, but the panel needs to see that relationship more clearly in order to inform their work.
And I think, I don't know how you want to say it, I don't know what the wordsmithing is, but just a comparison between what the panel would derive as an equally weighted composite versus what WIDA creates as a composite, which is not equally weighted. And then they can see the difference in relationships.
Thanks, Pete. So let me, I'll just open the floor here if the TAC wants to continue to provide some, give voice to feedback here, or if you want to just jump into the document and offer edits, which I think has been something of our tradition in the past.
I'll flag that I did add a second recommendation under the accountability and assessment update. It's just at Corinne's recommendation to attend to what the state might need to consider if the procurement process results in multiple vendors, and this specifically is picking up on Leslie's attention to coordination, communication, and consistency across vendors. That's something the state will need to, KDE would need to consider.
Yeah, this is Corinne Huggins Manley. Leslie or anybody, feel free. Your comment just stood out to me, so I just put in there. Something about that should be here.
This is Leslie. Yeah, thank you. That's nicely captures it. Thank you.
Any other just general comments on these proposed recommendations? Need more time to go through them and with a heads down review? And I think if not, we would welcome, am I right, KDE? Do we need a motion and a second to approve these recommendations? And can we do them? Okay, can we do them collectively as opposed to individually?
I think so, yes.
Yes.
Jenny?
Okay.
We have in the past.
Okay.
This is Suzanne Lane. I move to approve the recommendations.
I
Thanks,
second.
Suzanne.
This is Corinne Huggins Manley. I second.
Thanks. I heard Suzanne move and Corinne second. So we'll invite folks to either show actual hand raise or using the Teams hand raise if you support that motion. Great. Looks like that's unanimous. Thank you, TAC. Very helpful. And we appreciate your great advice today. And thanks for helping us make sure it's documented well.
To look ahead to our next meeting, which is in October, we will be convening in person. Looking forward to it already on October 13th and 14th in lovely Frankfurt. Hopefully we'll have great weather like we have in the past. And hopefully saying that didn't just jinx it, but you can blame me if it did. And so just wanted to offer a moment of reflection for you all to share any thoughts, considerations, or topics that you think would be particularly timely for us to consider with KDE and assembling the agenda for that meeting.
Will they have either preliminary or actual results of the new system that was just presented today for accountability?
That system won't be ready until next year. So there will be, because the regulations still need to be finalized and all those fund business rules worked out, there would be a standard setting for that system next summer. And so next fall's meeting will be a fun chance to talk about that. And Jennifer, I see you on screen too. Did you have something you wanted to lift up for that discussion? Maybe my display just changed so I could see you.
No,
Okay.
the only thing I would add is that our consolidated state plan would be going through as well. So we have to get that approved.
Yes, and that's, as you all likely know, the Department of Ed requests that states submit their consolidated state plan amendments in early February. That's the sort of timeline that Ed has committed to working towards approval for the following fall's reporting. Okay, well, we just wanted to open the floor in case there were any thoughts about the October meeting. Of course, if you have anything between now and then, feel free, you know how to get a hold of any of us. And we look forward to those recommendations or suggestions that you might have. Oh, Leslie, hi.
Hi, yeah, this is Leslie. I guess a couple of things that came to mind, and again, it depends on the timing, as you noted that some of
Yeah.
those it has some timing, and I know the center has a lot of experience and expertise in doing this, but I don't know if just for the sake of having it gone through the TAC, the standard setting plan you have for the accountability standard setting, it may be good for us just to take a look so that way you can at least say you've brought it through the TAC, even though I know there's a lot of experience doing that. The other one, I'm just curious, and again, this all goes down to the timing of the procurement, but this idea of having multiple vendors and possibly transition, I don't know if this is the tax rule to necessarily advise on that, but if there's any technical aspects of that, again, I don't know, I'm saying it's actually part of the procurement process, but it is one of those things that oftentimes, any advice around moving to multiple vendors, transitioning and stuff like that, if there's something from a technical perspective, that would be helpful for us to weigh in on. I don't know if the timing will work out, but that's something else that based on what we discussed today, maybe a good topic.
Yeah, I think that's a strong idea, Leslie, knowing that there is a goal to have the process complete. It might be before, it might be after when we meet, but if it's before, maybe there's a chance to for the TAC to weigh in on just some of the considerations of here's the result of the procurement and how do we kind of move forward given that. Thank you for those suggestions. Chris, did you have anything else you want to make sure we touch on today?
Nothing from me. I just appreciate the TAC. We covered a lot of ground. We got a lot of good advice, and I'm looking forward to our next meeting, which is in person. So it'll be nice to see everybody and continue our good work together.
Agreed. Friends at KDE, do you have any closing comments today?
Just again, that we so much appreciate your guidance and your feedback and the spirit in which you bring them. And thanks always to the Center for your facilitation and excellent work. So good luck. I wish you well and safe travels and good health until we see you in person.
In October. And so to adjourn, just as a reminder, we do need a motion and a second before we can go ahead and exit the meeting.
I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor of adjourning this convening of the Kentucky Technical Advisory Committee, raise hands, raise thumbs. Fantastic. This motion passes unanimously. Thank you, everybody. We do really appreciate your excellent contributions. Take care, be well, and we'll be in touch for the October meeting.
Thank you.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.